The content of this podcast is for informational purposes only. Statements made by hosts or guests reflect their own beliefs and opinions and is not investment advice. The hosts or guests may have personal investments in any assets being discussed.
Hey everyone, welcome to the DeFi podcast. Bill, our current host, is out today, so I will be replacing him. Today's show is going to be about this pivotal moment that we're in. I think we want to unpack where we are in the history of crypto. But first, I'm going to introduce the co-hosts. So we have Rhett, the founder of Avant, which is gearing up for an imminent launch on Avalanche. Hey, Rhett, how are you doing today?
Doing great.
Nice background. New background. I like it. Next, we have our resident firm bear, Jared. He's a crypto veteran who's been mining blocks since 2011 and now drives innovation as head of infra at Google. Hey, Jared, how are you feeling?
Pretty good. I'm so bearish, I'm longing Bitcoin.
I like, by the way, that we're all wearing black. I think this is a good look for us.
We are once again the Black T-shirt Club.
Black T-shirt Club. All right. I'm JF. I'm the head of DeFi at Google, and I'm an advisor to Avant. So let's dive in. So we're going to do pivotal moment in time. We're going to talk about what's going on in politics. I'm sure everyone wants to actually talk about how the market is super up, which is, I think, at least to me, less significant than where we are in time and what this signifies. So we're going to focus on that sort of bigger picture. But first, before we dive into that, we are going to do a full episode next week on Avant, this new project that Rhett and I and Bill have been working on, and that the Google Pool team has been backing. But just maybe if you can give us a 30-second elevator pitch on how things have been going, product progression, etc. Rhett, I think that'd be a nice way to open.
Yeah, development for Avant has been going great. Contracts are done and audited. The front end is looking super clean. We're excited to show it off to the world. And this is kind of the perfect time to be launching the strategy. So our first product will be AVUSD, which is a yield-bearing stable. And with the kind of crazy bull market that's been kicking off lately, market neutral yield is just really up significantly. Athena, which is one of the really well-known carry trade stables, I'm guessing its yield's going to be above 20% this week. And so long as the strong bull remains, I think across the board, there's going to be really high yields. So this is kind of a perfect environment to be launching that product into. We think it'll give the best market neutral yield you'll be able to find anywhere in DeFi, and those yields will be really good. So we're excited about that, and excited to launch some other yield-bearing assets after, things like AVBTC, AVETH, AVAVX, et cetera, that are just seeking to get the best risk-adjusted DeFi-based yield you can get on each of those assets. So yeah, excited.
Great. More on this next week. And I think we really want to focus on unpacking what's happened over the past couple of weeks. So last week we did a whole episode on the election and how that could be bullish for the U.S. economy. But I think there's sort of a greater point that I've heard some people mention in the market, which is that we've been sort of used to being repressed, being under someone's thumb for a little while, having a really hostile White House towards tech, more so than I think any other White House that we had ever seen in the past. And it was sort of like, something that we were just living with. And I think that's going to maybe change dramatically. But just a couple of points to remember what's happened over the past couple of years. So this White House and this administration in general, this government, has taken action after a bunch of banks under Choke Point 2.0, such as Silvergate, Signature, Metropolitan. They've debanked personal founders like Hayden Adams and Eric Voorhees. They've also debanked projects like Kraken, good actors generally in the ecosystem. The SEC's harassed a lot of good actors as well with Wells notices, actors such as Coinbase, Uniswap, Robinhood, OpenSea. The SEC also has been suspected of having, and I think it's pretty openly known that they had close ties with FTX. They were working on a regulatory framework that would have given the company preferential treatment in the market. Um, Also, I think we know that a lot of prominent Democrats, like Maxine Waters, potentially Joe Biden, were friendly with FTX, got a lot of campaign contributions. So obviously, FTX gave a lot of money to both parties, but that was very much skewed on one side. And this week, it's not stopping, right? Like we saw the FBI raid and confiscate electronic devices from all market founder Shane Copland. Um, so yeah, just curious on like how you guys are processing all this. If something is changing in the way you're sort of thinking about the world, like I've been sort of used to being under this regime where things are just negative. You're on defense. You're worried about what's coming next. And that is slowly changing, but I'm not able to just turn that on and off like overnight. Like it's taking me a couple of days or maybe a couple of weeks to really actually take all that in and be able to make that change in my mind.
Yeah, I think it's been really severe. I was listening to the A16Z podcast a couple of days ago, and Ben Horowitz and Mark Andreessen were saying that in their like 30 years in tech, both building and investing, the last 4 years has been the most hostile to tech and business ever, like by a long margin. They were quick to point out that not everyone is that way on either side of the aisle in like Congress. It hasn't been quite so severe, but the White House has been like egregiously bad, and the SEC has been egregiously bad as well. And so I don't think the fundamental changes will really come until January when new people are put into office and changes start being made to regulators. It's not just the White House change that's positive here. Obviously, the Trump administration is very pro crypto, but you really couldn't be any worse to crypto than Biden has been. In fact, I think if Harris had won, it would have been an improvement as well, probably a substantial one, most likely. But also, if you look at the number of pro crypto people that entered the House and Senate, it's like a huge number, on both sides of the aisle. So that's really, really positive. And yeah, some of these things have made it really hard to operate in the U.S. I think we're going to start seeing more founders be willing to locate themselves and their businesses in the U.S. Some may even relocate to the U.S. I think it'll be really good for asset prices. Super, super good for innovation. And I think the first hint of that we're seeing is that ETF inflows to the Bitcoin and ETH ETFs have been like really substantial since the election.
Yeah, I'll just add on to that by saying I think it's pretty obvious when you look at the stances that these people take on a lot of other issues. They're obviously going to take similar sort of authoritarian stances on crypto, especially because, if you look at DeFi, it's essentially a way to set up a financial system that has better rules mandated within the system. Like you can't go and fraud a DeFi system because everything is auditable and viewable on the blockchain, right? That's not the case in the financial or governmental system where you can just, benefit your friends and whitelist a couple of businesses that just happen to give really large political campaign donations. And then there you are. And I think crypto, again, specifically DeFi, is very good at exposing this grift, because when you see that a better system is possible, you end up looking at the current system and you're kind of like, well, why are we still doing it this way? And the only reason is because these people are just enforcing that it stays this way. So I think it's inevitable that will eventually change because crypto is just getting too popular to ignore.
Yeah, I saw the A16Z show as well. It's actually not a super watched podcast. I feel like not a lot of people talk about it, but I think it's great. I mean, it's obviously a great duo and an important one. The one of the things that I thought was interesting that they said on the show was we actually don't know why this government was so hostile. We never got an answer for that. So interesting to see you riff a little bit on that, Jared. Just thinking that maybe the tech is too powerful. Yeah, I'm not sure. Red, do you have a thought on that? Do you have a theory as to why?
I think it's pretty clear it's coming from Elizabeth Warren. Now the question is, why does she hate crypto so much? And I think two things. Elizabeth Warren is one who wants a lot of control over the financial sector, and I think she's aware that crypto is sufficiently empowering that like the amount that you even could theoretically control is way less. So I think that's scary to her. I think the other big thing here, and I think it had a really substantial impact, was many on the left were extremely cozy with Sam Bankman-Fried. Gary Gensler, we know, was the whole SEC was a bunch of he was the second biggest donor to Joe Biden, I think, and the number one or two donor to the left overall. And then when it turned out that he was basically the Bernie Madoff of our day, I think it's one of those like strong reactions where I think if you're Gary Gensler, you say, hey, I would rather be known as hostile to crypto than buddies with a fraudster. And so you kind of, I think that partly like amplified their behavior against crypto to be like, hey, maybe we'll have less egg on our face related to the Sam Bankman-Fried thing. To me, it just amplifies the egg because it's like we all still know that you were cozied up to him, and now you're going after all the good actors. You're suing MetaMask, you're suing Coinbase. They just sued Immutable. They're suing all the good actors, and then even the suits that went the other direction, like. They got sued by Grayscale to bring the Bitcoin ETF, and the courts came strongly on the side of Grayscale and basically said that SEC's behavior was arbitrary and capricious. There was a case in Utah where the judge pointed out that the SEC's behavior was a gross abuse of power. So then it just makes them look even worse. But I think that's maybe the instinct here is, hey, I look stupid because I supported a fraudster, so now I'm just going to attack the whole industry.
Do you think it just amplified the response? I mean, were they not already very hostile before that happened?
They were already hostile, but the level seemed to like step up significantly after that, and especially them going after like all the best actors. And the A16s, you guys point this out too. It's even worse than that. They did like. It was like it was targeted to do the most possible reputational damage to the industry because they sued every single good actor basically that's big. They sued Uniswap, they sued Coinbase, they sued MetaMask or Consensus. These are like very, very, very good actors building really quality, good products that are like operating well within the law and very ethical companies. And then they did nothing to go after the actual fraudsters. And that's maximum damage. If like it would have been much better if they also went after fraudsters and then also went after good actors. Or, I mean, ideal would be you go after fraudsters and then you don't go after good actors at all. But to go after the good and leave the bad alone to wreak havoc and like defraud people is the most possible damage you could do. And that's exactly what they've been doing.
So I think it's interesting to see like everyone take this moment and just like realize that like, oh wait, we've been sort of conditioned to like feel that like the government's against us, we're fighting the system, everything is hard. So obviously that changes now. I think it's hard to change that in one day. I think it's going to take a few weeks, maybe like a month. I mean, I think we're obviously with like the sort of pricing that we're seeing in the market right now that is changing rapidly. Just curious if you guys have thoughts on that.
Yeah, I mean the major changes that are the benefits of the industry are going to take years to play out. I think, we need good, reasonable regulation from the SEC. That's going to take, even if you get the best possible SEC chairs in there, SEC commissioners in there in a really good chair, you're going to have like, it's going to take months or years to get like good, digital asset regulation. The stablecoin bill that's being floated around, that could be good or bad. It depends. Like, I think it's unclear. But I'm guessing it'll be good given so many like pro crypto or people are coming into office, et cetera. But that'll take a while to work its way through the system. But you can have a lot of immediate changes just from like we don't have to wait to know that as crypto founders, we're much less likely to be getting in trouble for doing nothing wrong. And the fact that Donald Trump himself is now like basically a DeFi founder, like I think that's an indication that it's legal to build, good quality DeFi products now. So I think people will start responding to that right away. So I don't think it'll take that long for some of the really positive things to play out. But I think the biggest things are going to take decades to play out. You need years of good treatment for like really a lot more really good people to feel like, hey, it's safe to play here, and then they come. There's a lot of institutions and there's a lot of builders, et cetera, that are going to be more conservative and will like still wait and see probably for a few more years, I'm guessing.
I think it's obvious just looking at the sentiment that people are bringing to the table on the side of, like, Trump and Elon and whoever he might get in there. There's obviously a pro crypto stance in the administration that's about to be set up. At least more pro crypto than where we were before. That's for sure. But I would say never doubt the interest in people with money or influence to try and take a good thing and benefit themselves off of it. I think that's bound to happen because that always happens. So those can be detractors, but at least we're going in a good direction. We just have to. I think people just need to be prepared for the inevitable grifters who will come along, riding the bandwagon. They got here 5 minutes ago on the coattails of people who've been here for 10 years plus, and they will, inevitably give everyone else a bad rap.
I love how your bullishness sounds very bearish. Very like true to brand.
I do think the warning about grifters is a good one, though. There's definitely a lot of that happens, and more of it happens in really positive markets like this. And it's like crypto is one of those interesting worlds where you attract the best and the worst. So yeah, people need to be very careful of grifters and fraudsters, et cetera. And it's funny, some of the best builders, this guy named Andre Cronje, who has built lots of major DeFi projects, and he's also the founder of Phantom, rebranded now to Sonic. It's a layer 1 blockchain. He for whatever reason, he seems to rage quit building in crypto every time we're at like a peak bull market, because he's so frustrated with like the level of like grift, et cetera. And then when we're in the depths of the bear market, he's like back building again. So people like him, I think, that's like just kind of a funny example of how he's right. There's a lot of that to look out for when you're coming into this. And I saw a friend post something on Twitter recently where he basically said, hey, now that crypto's pumping and things are positive again, your friends and family are going to be like taking a lot of interest in crypto again. And so you maybe should try to help them avoid getting scammed by proactively chatting with them and saying, hey, if you want to get involved in crypto, don't like here are good sources of information, and here's some good places to start, both for information and for like assets you want exposure to, et cetera. It'd be sad to have some friends or family members like suddenly get interested in crypto and then go buy some scam coin that they don't even know what it is.
So yeah, I'd say in general, if you just, avoid the Solana ecosystem, you're good to go.
Okay. No comments. So moving forward, so last week we did a show about how Elon and Vivek and potentially Ron Paul were going to be part of the DOGE, the Department for Government Efficiency, and we were 66% correct. So we got Vivek and we got Elon. Looks like they're going to be heading that that process. And I'll just read a point that I made last week, which I think is under-discussed and underappreciated in crypto, which is that, of all the executives that could be doing this, one that has the most, that's had the most run-ins and that has been the most critical of the SEC that I know of is Elon. Elon actually, amongst having other sort of like issues, has had major issues with the SEC, where he has criticized the SEC like very deeply. And the SEC, looking at everything that was sort of said in the intro of all the different ways that crypto was being targeted, via the SEC and via the FDIC, those were like the main two organizations that were able to harm crypto. So very, very bullish, I think, for the crypto industry that the person that is going to be doing all the reform actually is very, very skeptical of the SEC in general. Curious if you guys have thoughts on that.
Yeah, so I was criticized last week for mentioning with the good can come some bad. Um, and I was told I was being too negative for that stance. And then I agree with you. I think, Elon does have some good takes when it comes to the SEC and the Fed and all that stuff, but he doesn't hold a candle to Ron Paul. And it looks to me like the moment Ron Paul started criticizing a couple of picks from the Trump campaign, he was out of the picture, and now he's no longer part of that, it seems.
I don't know. I
So
mean, it was never official that he was going to be part of this department, right? Like Trump is just starting to put some people up. By the way, I think Elon retweeted like a Ron Paul thing, yesterday or today. So I think it's, he's maybe not part of the cabinet necessarily, but I think his like sort of his thoughts will be, part of what they do. I don't know. Doesn't seem.
Yeah, it's unclear exactly how that'll work. So the DOGE, the Department of Government Efficiency, will not be an official department. This is not a paid position. These are outside advisors. It's led by Vivek and Elon, but I'm guessing other people will be involved, and none of them will be paid. Elizabeth Warren kind of had a little bit of a self-own this week, where she was like, "Oh, look how efficient they are. There's two people doing one person's job," and Musk was like, "We're not being paid for this job, first of all." It's highly efficient financially for the government, And so, yeah, I don't know what'll happen with Ron Paul. I love him. I think he's great. I think that he and Elon have similar instincts of, we need to chop way down on the size of government. I think there's entire agencies that should be done away with, several entire agencies that should be done away with, and almost all of the others should be like much, much smaller. I do think that this is like a very urgent need. It looks like inflation might be creeping back up again. U.S. government spending is way out of control. I think we do need to be like very aware of like how much economic damage it could do to the entire world if the U.S. remains fiscally irresponsible, just because the dollar is everywhere. So I really hope they're able to take a huge chunk out of that. If we can get spending way down, and then if we can get energy production way up, especially things like nuclear, like if we could start deploying more nuclear energy, like that would have a really big impact on overall inflation and GDP, et cetera. That is, in some ways, it's a semi some people would argue that's a semi anti-crypto take, because some people who are ultra crypto bulls would say crypto is a bet that the U.S. government and others will be mismanaged, and that eventually the dollar will die and we'll need something to replace it. I would rather that be a slow multi-century death where it's like crypto is like way better, but the U.S. economy isn't going to go into the next Great Depression and have the dollar completely implode. It's like, well, it'll slowly weaken against crypto. And that's just, I hope for a world where we have human prosperity and not excessive suffering.
I mean, I think, crypto could just be a competing system and have that effect of reforming governments, right? So like governments have never had competition, and other governments aren't really competition because there's like, politics involved. But now, you could have US dollar versus Bitcoin. And that could be, unlike gold, like you could have Bitcoin as a, practical means of payment. Obviously not on the L1 that they run, but, there are ways to do it, right? So it could just, push in the short term the government to reform and spend less and so on, because they sort of have to compete, which would be a nice, I think, outcome. And then long term, what might happen is that this is just a more efficient way to process payments. It's a more efficient way to have agreements between different parties, or do a bunch of different data storage and movement around the internet. And it could become a winning technology, but maybe it doesn't become the sort of doesn't become money right away. That might take a really, really long time to happen, which could be a good thing. Yeah, if it performs governance.
I think the lid is off on that one. Government spending is out of control, like Rhett said, but just stopping it at this point, I don't think is good enough. The debt is so high that you would need to not spend and then start paying it back for the next multiple decades in order to get to a place where that's not going to still have serious repercussions.
Unless you have crazy growth and that could solve everything, right? Like a mix of AI and deregulation at the same time and smart policies. If you put those three things together and just like what can happen to the
And
economy
energy.
could be, yeah, yeah, all these, yeah, if you unleash.
I think they need to take a stance of soon or eventually ending the Fed, because if you don't do that, I mean, yes, you could be super productive and then increase your capacity, but then if you're only ever just increasing your debt along with your capacity, uh, I'm not a fan of this version of economics. I think in the long run it ends up making people need to be more productive while earning less out of their productivity. Um, and you know what, like, and yeah, I fully take that stance of like crypto is definitely a good bet against the dollar. And I would even be comfortable with the U.S. taking like the China approach of just accept it, start printing trillions of dollars, and put it into assets.
Yeah, that's an interesting viewpoint. I do think that the gentlest way to properly fix the problem, I think, would be you drive down spending a lot, and then grow a lot. And the growth piece is the thing that's going to do the most work over the long term. But yeah, we would need like mass deployment of nuclear energy, drive the energy costs in the U.S. to 10% of where they are now, and then JF's point, AI, et cetera. I do think that would solve the problem, but then you also have to not guarantee, like you also have to make sure that government spending doesn't get out of control again in the future, and then you can just kind of chip away at it.
So maybe we can close out on this story, which isn't crypto related. It's political, but I think it's maybe uh, a good indication of where we stood and how different campaigns were doing different things. It came out this week, or at least allegedly, that Kamala Harris was spending around $6 million a day on her campaign, whereas Trump was spending $100,000 a day, which is a very large difference, obviously. Um, and some of that extra spending on the Kamala side was paying for things like endorsements from celebrities. So the celebrities that went on stage and endorsed Kamala, maybe that was all made up, which is pretty dystopian, in my opinion. And so, for example, it seems like possible that Beyonce might have been paid $10 million, Megan Thee Stallion $5 million, Lizzo $3 million, Eminem 1.8, Oprah 1 million. So these are the prices that these people, got paid to essentially influence your vote. Just curious what you guys think of that, and if you think it has sort of like there's a wider message in there of like how things are done in the U.S. and how elections are ran.
Taking the non-dystopian view, I think one thing to look at, and I think it's funny, if I remember right, it was Elizabeth Warren again was saying like, "Hey, look, we need to make sure these billionaires can't be stealing the elections or whatever." And Kamala raised like what 4 times more than Trump. He raised somewhere in the 3 to 400 million range. She raised over $1 billion. She lost badly. She paid for a bunch of endorsements, still lost badly. And I think, from what I understand, the research has shown this for a lot of years, but just like confirms that money can't buy elections unless it's already really close. It's like if it's a dead heat, if it's a true 50-50, and you outspend your opponent 2-1, then maybe you bump it up to 51 and you win. But spending by itself does not sway elections in the ways that people think, in my opinion. So I view this in some ways as like validation that it's not like money just controls everything. So I think that's a really positive. And I think one of the lessons the Democrats need to learn here is that they need to think about what policies made them so unpopular this time and fix some of that rather than just try to, raise more money next time, if that makes sense.
I don't know. I think it looking back at it, I mean, it was pretty easy to tell at the time as well, but like looking back at it, it's like super obvious how astroturfed a lot of this stuff was. Paying people for endorsements, getting all the media on your side, like they're all taking the same. It's almost like they had like a press release and they're all just speaking the same lines, one after the other. But yeah, like, I don't know. There was a story a couple months back that I think went kind of under the radar. Somebody had brought a stingray to a Kamala rally. For anybody who doesn't know, a stingray is a device that will act as a fake cell tower, and it will capture all of the information from all the cell phones in the vicinity around it. And then you can analyze some of the data that is coming from those cell phones. And one of the things you can do is like see where is that cell phone based from. There are a lot of things that you can track from that. And somebody took a stingray to a Kamala Harris rally and found that in this big wide open stadium with like thousands and thousands of people, out of 5,000 cell phones that had connected to this device, 3,000 of those cell phones were from out of state, which then also kind of like coincides with going to one of these rallies and just seeing like
It's all made up.
a mile long of buses filled with people coming to fill it up. It's like the real life version of like a Sybil attack. Is that a good comparison? You're making it seem like there are more unique wallets attending these things.
But it doesn't work. The mask eventually comes off. And so it's like, okay, if you want to do that and make it look like you have more support than you do, fine. You're still not going to win, And I wonder if they kind of recognize that internally, like, hey, we're doing all these things to make our numbers look better than they are. Like, we know we're actually like struggling here. And I think that like most Americans, I think this is probably true for most of the world, but I think a lot of Americans are pretty independently minded and are not going to be like, oh, I don't know who to vote for. Oh, look, Oprah and Beyonce said vote for Kamala. Oh, and she got a bunch of people at her rally. I guess I'm voting for her. Like, I think some people overestimate how much of a sheep mindset there is.
I would slightly disagree with that. I mean, I would slightly like push back. I think people want to fit in, and a lot of people don't really follow politics, and they sort of go like, oh, like what tribe am I part of, right? And that's how I'm going to make my decisions, because it's a simpler way to sort of navigate the world, and people are busy. You're obviously very thoughtful. I think everyone on our pod is, about what's going on in the world. We're pretty informed. Most people do not have that level of care. I don't think we're like representative of how people approach these decisions. There's a lot of people who will just, I think, try to vote the right way, and they don't necessarily know what they're voting on in terms of issues specifically.
Yeah, and I think there are more than enough like sociological experiments to prove this kind of thing bears out in reality. Like you look at I think it's called like the Milgram experiment. There's a few other ones where whether it's authority or following the crowd, some people will actually go against their better judgment if either an authority is telling them, no, it's fine, like just do this thing because this is what I'm telling you to do. Or, if you're sitting in a room full of 10 people and you're the one outlier, you're more likely to change an answer to be true just so that you don't, like, you may think, oh, maybe there's something wrong with the thing that I'm saying. So you'd be more likely to change your opinion because everyone else in the room, even if they're doing it on purpose just to sway your opinion, are making that decision a different way. You would be influenced. At least some amount of people would be influenced to change their decision that they know to be right.
Yeah, I think everyone on this pod is like an entrepreneurial sort of bone in their body, and that's just not most people. Like if you're a builder, if you're willing to challenge, the status quo and what most people think, and create waves and sort of have to fight for things, and that's just not how most people operate, actually. And I'm not saying that in a way like to put ourselves above. It's just not how most people operate.
Well, and there's actually useful elements to groupishness and social cohesion, etc. So there's definitely tribalism and groupishness and a desire to be accepted and not ostracized, etc. And actually, there's a positive element to that. Humans are very social creatures. There definitely is a lot of that, I think. but I think there's like on the margin, there's like a pretty strong independent mind amongst many Americans and probably many people across the world as well. I'm not trying to just say,
So
call Americans out
let me challenge you
specifically.
again. Let me just ask you a question. Sorry to cut you off. So
Good.
if the Democrats did not in this election have all of Hollywood, the mainstream media, and all of these sort of endorsements, what do you think this landslide would look like? Like, how much worse would it have been? My guess, just to sort of rhetorical, I guess, my question, but my guess is that it would have been quite a bit worse. There would have been no support
I
for the
think it,
Democrats because their actions, their actual record is indefensible.
I think mainstream media is an interesting one here because they have hurt their own credibility so much over the last like 20 years, and it's just like gone up and up and up over the last few years. They have like a major boy who cried wolf problem where they keep getting caught manipulating everything, and trust in the media is like an all-time low. Viewership is tanking. A lot of the companies that own these are like trying to sell them off. I can't remember who it is that owns MSNBC. They're trying to sell it and they can't find a buyer. Viewership's way down. Trust in media is less than trust in Congress. And at this point, like you have all the media on your side and you have a bunch of celebrities on your side. I actually think that the marginal effect is relatively low at this point and shrinking. And the size of the effect was bigger 10 years ago, bigger than that 20 years ago, et cetera. But I'm not saying it's no effect, but I think that it's shrinking rapidly. Like if you go look at a chart of like how much do you trust, traditional media, Democrats, Republicans, and independents, all of them are on a strong downward trajectory. And Republicans and independents both, their trust in traditional media is like sub 10%. Believe that mainstream media is like highly reliable.
A lot of people have recently talked about the Overton window, and I think that window is sort of like representative of what I'm talking about here. Like voting for Trump, I think in many blue states and cities, is just from a tribal perspective, you cannot do it. Like you will be ostracized completely. So my guess is that all this stuff that they did, although less and less effective every year, I will agree with you. Like I think sort of like free information is winning against this barrage of like AstroTurf. But my guess is that you would have had like tens of millions of votes that just wouldn't have been there if you didn't have all the support. So I think all this stuff actually
There's also a question here. Yeah, I think it does. But there's also a question here of like the shy Trump voter. So part of the interesting story behind this French whale that made $20 million voting for Trump on Polymarket, what his belief is that the polls themselves were undervaluing how many people were going to vote for Trump, because there's so many people who are afraid of getting canceled that if you call them and say, who are you voting for? They'll say Kamala, or they'll say someone else, even if they're planning to vote Trump. And so what you do is you call instead and ask them who they think their neighbors will be voting for. And then you get more honest responses. My understanding is that this guy is a pretty wealthy guy. He paid for his own pollster to go do like a neighbor poll like that. And it showed Trump like way up compared to like the traditional polls. And then he threw $30 million onto that bet and made 20. And so I think that's the other thing here is like you'll get canceled if you vote for Trump. Well, I think a lot of people who feel like they'll get canceled if they vote for Trump, instead they signal that they won't, and then they do, and then they lie about it, So, I think, so the actual vote outcome, and private voting probably has an impact there. Like if you change it to be like everyone can see who everyone else voted for, then you might have more of this like, hey, I kind of get to force people into whatever behavior is not going to get them canceled. But I think the true effect there is maybe like not so great.
Yeah, I mean, I think directionally we're sort of saying the same thing, but I guess we sort of have like a difference in how big we think the effect is. I'd actually like to wrap up the show. We're coming up on like 45 minutes. Jared, do you want to do a last statement? Maybe can you say something bullish also? Can we end on a bullish Jared note? I think that would be nice.
No.
There's not enough good news.
No, I just want to tack on one last point to the sort of conversation we've been having. very interesting to watch some tweets that are circulating around. You guys may have seen it. The reactions are most interesting from people who did vote for Joe Biden in 2020. And so the thing they're reacting to is a tweet that shows the vote totals for Obama, Trump, Biden, Trump. And you've got like 59 million, 60 something million. And then it's like Biden's like 80 something. And then Kamala is back down to like 60 something. And the same thing with Trump. And it's like, there's a major discrepancy in those numbers. And there's not a very good way to explain that discrepancy. And the funny thing is watching some people who did vote for Joe Biden being like confused by this and starting to question it themselves. So I think that reopens some old questions.
Yeah, that one's interesting. I think I'd be interested to see what those numbers look like once all the vote tallies are completed, because I saw that like one day after when they were still tallying votes. So the final numbers weren't here yet. I think you could also, at least a partial explanation would be like maybe there was a COVID effect where behaviors changed a lot during 2020, people being all forced to work from home, et cetera. And I wonder if like that somehow affected willingness to do absentee voting or things like that, or mail-in voting, I mean. And so I don't know if there's an effect there, but yeah, it could also be an indication that there's something weird going on. One thing that really annoys me about this whole thing is like, one thing that can get you canceled is just questioning. And I think questioning, generally speaking, is good. Like that's the whole that's what science is. It's a science of like rigorous questioning. And so I think asking the questions is actually not a bad thing. But yeah, I'm curious to see what that chart looks like once we have final numbers in.
I'll end this on this thought. I think questioning is legal again. So that's my bullish thought for the week. All right, everyone. Thank you for watching, and we'll see you next week. Bye-bye.